Welcome to episode 109 of the Xrm Toolcast. In this episode, Scott and I speak with Andrew Vogel, the creator of the Microsoft.Xrm.DevOps.Data tool, a tool that can be used to extend the configuration data migration tool from Microsoft. It can be used to merge and subtract data, as well as include data from multiple packages. So if you ever wished you could do more with the configuration data migration tool, then this is definitely the show for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Xrm Toolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott, fully caffeinated Drew. Scott, how's it going?
Yes, thank you, Daryl. Yes, the caffeinated version this morning, which is could go horribly wrong, to be honest, because I don't drink very much coffee, and so if I start speaking much faster than normal, or maybe much slower than normal, who knows? Well, let's see what happens. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We'll have to warn those that normally listen to it at 2x speed that maybe because of Scott, they'll have to tone it down just a little bit, one and a half maybe or something.
I'll just start bouncing around the room later on. But yes. But it's been a while actually, hasn't it? You've been away, right?
I've been away. Just got back from Florida. We left Naples, Florida at 4:30 in the morning, and arrived in Indianapolis at 9:30 at night. And we stopped twice for gas. And one time we stopped gas, we grabbed a bite to go. So I mean, we weren't moving probably maybe 15 minutes. The rest of the time we were moving.
Wow. That's impressive stuff. Yeah. So, you were hyper focused. So I bet you must have been quite caffeinated on that.
No, because if you're caffeinated, you got to go pee. So you can't do that. So you just got.
So how were your kids with this whole thing? Is like,
they don't know. Well, you learn to dehydrate them when that's the course. You got to do it ahead of time.
You realize social services is going to be onto you from this. Like,
they're old enough now; they'll figure it. It's past.
It's like when I used to go on long haul flights with the kids. I used to drug them with those, the travel sickness tablets that make you incredibly drowsy, which is always a risk because if they wear off mid flight, then it goes really badly wrong because then they're really grouchy and then yeah, exactly. But you have to kind of keep them medicated in the safe zone. So I'm with you on that one. Yes. So it was kind of like you were migrating then from one place to another, Daryl.
I was kind of, yeah.
Yes.
It was kind of like migrating, kind of like we might migrate some data from time to time, huh?
Yes, exactly. Migrating data. It's a problem that you have in software a lot. So
and maybe we have to do a lot. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe we have a guest that might want to talk about migration.
Yes. Maybe we have someone that has a tool that helps with some migration. So our guest today, with this amazingly smooth transition that Scott came up with, yes, I'm impressed, Scott, yes, is Andrew Vogel. He's a senior software engineering manager, Dynamic CE, currently working at Inspire Medical Systems. Andrew, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm glad I can be here and talk about migrating data.
Yes, it's so exciting. Yeah. It's the most exciting podcast we'll ever have. It's just talk about migrating data. We can't get more excited.
We can make it. That's why I had the caffeine, because we can make migrating data great again.
There are some parts of it which I think are very cool. So we'll see how excited we can get here.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you here, Andrew. It really is.
Yes, and you've recovered from the flu, so that's good too.
Yes. It definitely had me on my back for a little bit, but honestly, I hadn't had the flu in a number of years. I forgot how terrible it could actually be. I lost 8 pounds while I was on it. It was miserable. Yeah.
Yes.
That's certainly not man flu. Because whenever I get ill, that's always the thing. Is like I get told you've just got man flu, and you're just making a big thing out. But when you actually lose weight, then that's like scientific proof that you're not actually just saying, "Oh, I feel so ill." Yeah. But give statistics to prove it.
I'm glad to be doing better. And the one disadvantage of that is sometimes you get sick, but your brain's still working, so you can get stuff done. This is the sickness where your brain is not working. So unfortunately, you can't be productive. You just lose that time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm glad to be past it.
Yeah. Well, one of our previous guests, Ivan Finko, he horrendously broke his arm but he started coding with like Copilot and stuff. So that's the kind of example of like being ill, but your brain is still. But yeah, when you're sick like that, then you just have to sleep it off. So yeah, no, I'm glad you're feeling better.
That's actually partly where my tool came from.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want a little history in there or not.
Well, let's before we get that, yeah. So let's put a pin right in there. So the name of the tool is the Microsoft.Xrm.DevOps.Data tool. I guess you get the tool at the end if you want to. But anyway, I think I found it. I think you posted something about it, or maybe I found it on GitHub. I'm not sure which, but it's a tool that helps work with the configuration data migration tool. So it's kind of like a companion tool with it, if I understand it correctly. So anyway, with that introduction, yes, let's get into the history of what this tool is.
Sure. When I worked as a consultant for a number of years. And one of the things that became very valuable to me along the way is how do you deliver value to the business? And that kind of led me down a path of caring a lot about methodology, like agile, different ways to get requirements, to figure out what things to deliver. And eventually I joined Power Objects, and I was working with Best Buy. I had interns, and I decided to do a proof of concept with them. And originally I had them write this PowerShell script because at that time there was no way to transfer records from CRM from one environment to another using the package deployer in a filtered way, because the configuration migration data tool had no filtering capability as part of it. So I had the interns do a little bit of a proof of concept, and they basically got it working, and it was pretty cool. But eventually I ended up, so I went through a divorce, and if you've been through something like that or some really terrible thing, sometimes you need a distraction. And so as I was working and the weekends or looking for a distraction to go through, I ended up spending a lot of time basically rebuilding this from the ground up using test-driven development, different types of C# and kind of extreme programming practices in there. But my goal was I would like a tool where I can take fetches, throw them into this little PowerShell script, and much faster than Xrm tool or than the data migration tool generate a data file for me. And as I worked through it, I added some different features in there, which I think made it pretty useful and cool, but also trying to sidestep some of the problems that people often have with that data migration tool that Microsoft provided, where you forget to set like an identifier, and so now it matches on name and it updates the wrong records. Or you forget to disable plugins, and you're now running it, and all of a sudden you have hundreds of thousands of plugins triggering in every single direction, sending emails and doing things you don't want to happen. And also automatically having different sorts in there, so that if you want to take the data and put it into like a GitHub repository, it's always in the same order. And so you can actually see very good kind of change sets and how things change over time for your records, and not just your configuration or plugins in your system.
I've always thought the configuration migration tool, or the CMT, maybe we should start calling it for brevity, has been one of the most underrated tools over the whole history of development in this platform, right? Because it's always had this capability of creating records in the target system with a specific GUID. Like, you can actually go and create a record and know that GUID is going to be the same in all the different environments. And of course, way back in the day when we weren't using Power Automate, we were using classic workflows, because no one used classic workflows anymore, of course. You had lookups, right? And you had those lookups against records that if you had a record that you were looking up and you moved that workflow between environments, then the GUID had to be the same in all those different environments. Otherwise, the workflow would import and break. So it's always had these little kind of nuances that meant that it was a really cool tool to be able to do. But like you say, it never really had that kind of traction to be able to put it into your tool chain about, in your ALM. You had to kind of manually run it, and it never had that filtering capability. So maybe you could just sort of take people through how the CMT works, and what that kind of filtering or not filtering story is about.
Yeah, so the CMT, if you haven't used it before, is part of Microsoft standard. You run a little PowerShell snippet, it downloads the solution exploder, some DLLs, and also this configuration migration data tool, as well as a package deployer. And the package deployer is also very cool. It's scriptable, right? You can put solutions in it. You can put a data package. You can put different configuration. You just run it and it does whatever you want against an environment. But the configuration migration data tool, that CMT, is where you can generate a data package representing different records within a system. And so Microsoft originally recommended it for knowledge management articles, also for unified service desk, if you had configurations in there and they could have some templates. It's a little bit clunky, but it worked, and it worked well. It just didn't have filtering capability on it. And so when you're in that tool, you would grab different tables from your Dynamics, your CE environment, your Dataverse, and you would grab the fields that you want as part of those tables. You would set an identifier for when that data moves from one environment to another and say, this is what it's going to match on. By default, it does the name field, but you can change it to like the GUID field, and then it will keep that GUID in sync. You can add a bunch of different records. You can add relationships as well, like many-to-manys as part of it. And then you export it, and it very slowly then walks through, grabbing all the records very, very slowly. But eventually,
very slowly, yeah.
Eventually, on the other side of it, you have the zip file with very nicely formatted data inside of it. That if you want to put it in source control and watch it, if you have like settings records within an environment, for instance, like it's an easy way to track those things. And Microsoft has another PowerShell library out there now where you can take those data files and you can run the PowerShell and it will import it to the next environment for you as well. So it's a very easy way to kind of complement a solution to say, okay, now if you have records as well that need to move between environments, here's how you move them.
And the one-to-many feature, I mean, I think that's quite significant, right? Because, you know, especially when you've got self-referential kind of relationships, because that's always the big deal, right? When you're what's the classic one where you've got parent-child accounts, you know, that was always a challenge, right? Where, I mean, obviously accounts is probably a bad example because although you can use it to import real data, right? I mean, I've run the tool for, you know, thousands and thousands of records. So although it's called the configuration migration, you can actually use it if you wanted to import many records. And it works out how to import the ones that are parent before the child, so that you do have that referential integrity, so you're not going to get like lookups that don't exist because they've not been imported yet.
Yeah. Well, think of test data, for instance, right? Like it's not just data you want to bring to prod, but maybe you have an environment and you want to refresh test data. You have a script that deletes it or a bulk delete, and you have your configuration data package now, which goes through and sets it up again. And so that could be accounts, right? And you could have self-referential links. And like you said, one of the cool things about it is not just can it disable plugins automatically, not just can it do that mapping and preserve those GUIDs, but it can do multiple passes on records, making sure lookups will be there if it's bringing in like two different sets of records and they need to reference each other, or even if it needs to reference itself, right? It will get that right and we'll get to the end. So it ends up being very robust that way. And if you do need to move data, it's like, yeah, you can rely on it. And it's a Microsoft tool and they've tested it really well and it does its job.
And the piece you were saying about the packaging, the package deployment, you know, maybe can you explain a little bit about that and how that fits in with the CMT?
Yeah. One of the goals I think a lot of us have is fully automated deployments where you don't have manual steps anymore and you can just rely on them to be 100% accurate and perfect. The package deployer as one of those tools allows you to put solutions into it and in a certain order, as well as a configuration migration data file. And when you run it, you can actually have C# code in there as well. And so if you have like certain cleanup or if you want to make it idempotent based on whatever's happening, you can create that as your deployment package and have all your rules in there. And when you run it, it goes through solutions, it publishes after all the solutions are brought in, it runs the data file, it makes sure they're all brought into there. You get really nice logging for it. And it works really well. Like you create a pipeline and you just drop in your package deployer and it can grab it. And if you have the little PowerShell written up there, it, you know, deploy it to every environment along the way without worrying about what's happening. And that was really the goal of what does it look like to have a fully automated pipeline.
And of course, with AppSource, package deployment and test data. If you're an ISV and you do have a solution AppSource, test data is quite important, as is your example. So you can include that test data inside that package.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to do with this tool as I was working through it is make it more flexible for these data packages, right? So like package deployer, it only allows you to do one data file. And so if you have 5 teams running or 10 teams running and you get back 8 different data files you need for that release, it can be cumbersome to do all these things. And so as I was working on it, I added some capability to do merges and appends as well as subtractions. And so if you have 8 different data packages, you can take 8 different data packages, you can combine them into one data package. You can take that data package, you can say, here's another fetch I need to include. It will then grab the data and put it into that data package. And then also has a subtract capability where it's amazingly helpful for comparing environments. So let's say you have settings data in prod or settings data in dev. You run the fetch in that tool against prod and you get a data package. You run it against dev. You take prod and you subtract dev, and now you see exactly what's different in prod that's not in dev, or vice versa, right? And now also you have a Delta package that you can then put into your pipeline to make exactly whatever change you want all the way through your environments.
So that subtraction option, is that a part of your tool then to take, or just to give me the differences? And does it do it by entity? Does it do it by attribute, or does it by both?
It will do it all the way down to the attribute level.
Okay.
Yep. And so it will look at those different pieces. And if you want to subtract just one attribute, you can just drop one attribute from that file.
Yeah. Because I'm assuming you don't care about the differences in created on or modified by. I don't care about those, but the actual payload that you do care about, whatever the custom fields are you've added, or whatever those main fields are you added, are the ones you would care about. So in that case, you could say, hey, skip these attributes. These attributes, I do want to see what is the difference between these attributes, and basically, hey, I want to make sure these 7 attributes or these 10 attributes are all the same between my prod environment and this side, or the environment A and B. It doesn't have to be prod, I guess, but yeah. Cool.
Sometimes also with troubleshooting, right? Like, hey, my prod's operating differently than my prod-like environment. Okay, great. Let me run a few scripts. We're going to do a huge comparison very, very quickly, and it's going to tell me exactly what's different between these different environments. And so you end up figuring out ways to use these tools to be able to do comparisons very quickly. And if you do see like, oh, well, here's the one field that's different, now you also have a data package, which you can then put into a pipeline and do some testing around, and you're ready to go to get that fixed.
So your packages, your tools is like, it's almost like power tools for CMT. That's what I kind of see it as. It's like this CMT plus. It's all these extra goodies that you can add on to make it easier for you, your life easier, and which is really what tools are all about, isn't it? The XRM toolbox, everything that people create, it's all about making people's life easier.
Yeah, and I didn't want to reinvent the wheel for how we actually bring data into the environment. Right. And so like I have 100 and some different unit tests on this, and it's going through every single different field type, and it's doing a character by character comparison to what the CMT tool exports. And the goal there is not to create a tool that can do the import itself into a CRM environment, but to create a tool that makes packages 100% compatible with the CMT and the Microsoft tools. So you can take 2 packages, you can combine them, but then you can rely on the Microsoft PowerShell scripts and whatever out there to do all the import for you. You don't have to worry about some kind of configuration issue on that side of it.
I suddenly saw Daryl's interest peaked there when you said 118 unit tests. Daryl's like, wait, what?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it did say that he has 100% code coverage, which is, I don't think I've ever had a project that was 100% code coverage. So I guess, what'd you call it, extreme programming techniques, you said, or you definitely, if you truly have 100%, like that's impressive, because that means like error messages and stuff like that. Those are the ones that usually I like, if If it errors, it errors. If it doesn't error, then I guess I'm okay. I don't have to be as concerned about trying to get 100% code coverage on that. But if you've done that, well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
That accolade does not come easily from Daryl. I mean, I don't think Daryl's ever said well done to me. So,
Nor will I ever. You're never good enough, Scott.
There we go. Really,
you gotta get better.
Well, maybe there's a plugin here for test-driven design in the long run too. So I don't know if you guys have ever tried that, like in its pure form, but that's part of extreme programming, and it's the idea that you're writing the test before you do any work itself, right? And so for me, especially with this tool, it was like, okay, if I have data with this one attribute that's a string of this value, here's what I expect it to look like on the other side. And so I write a test. Now I do one for a Boolean. Now I do one for an integer. Now I do one for a date field. Now I do one for this. Right? And it goes through all the primitives. And then I create all my tests for, okay, now I'm going to combine a few of them into a data package. Now I'm going to do special exceptions where it takes data from a fetch from one environment and it takes data from a data package in another. And this is the result on the outside of it. And I wrote probably 100 of those unit tests before I wrote a single line of code. And then it was figuring out, okay, how do I make this work? What does that architecture look like? And after I got all the unit tests to pass, and I looked and I was like, okay, it's at like 95% code coverage. And it's, again, like the errors that you're talking about, Daryl. And it's, well, let me try those out and see what actually happens. And it's like, oh, that's a weird message. Let's improve that. Yeah.
So design-driven or test-driven design, is that what it was? Is that different than test-driven development, or is it the same word for different things? Like, is there a difference between those two? Because I've heard of test-driven development, and that's stuff that I've definitely used before, and it's been very helpful. Even if I created the same code at the end of the day as I would have before, I wouldn't have. But even if it somehow I did manage to do that without doing like a test-driven design, it does such a good job of figuring out what do I need to work on next, and not being like, okay, I got this giant thing. What do I work on? This. Okay, I got that done. What do I need to work on next? All right, what am I working? I don't know what I'm working on next. Like, yeah. So, is there a difference between the test-driven design versus the test-driven development?
I may just be saying the wrong word. I don't remember anymore.
Naming things as hard is probably the same thing. I just wanted to make sure. It sounds like it's the same thing. I just didn't know if you clarify there's a difference.
I'm glad it's not just me that gets these. They just become like blur, and it's just, you think, well, does it matter?
Google says test-driven development. So yes, I was going with the TDD acronym in my head and just making up words, but yeah.
I love, or I hate, I get frustrated. There we go. We get the right English word here. I get frustrated. I'm on a project, and we have unit tests, and there's a bug, and I see a PR, and all they've done is they've edited the actual code itself, and they haven't done a single unit test. I'm like, so obviously we have a bug that we didn't catch on a unit test, which must have been kind of hard or kind of difficult. It must not have been easy, and now you're saying you fixed it without actually putting another test in there to say that yes, you fixed. Like, how do you know you fixed it? The only way you have to know that is by actually the only way you can even attempt to guess you've done that is by compiling, deploying, manually testing. Go, yeah, I think it's fixed now. Versus if you did a test first and go, yep, here's my bug, here's my error, and then once you get your test passing, you don't have to do all the other work. You're done. You've already verified that yes, you had the bug, yes, you've identified the bug, yes, you fixed the bug, and now you won't make the same mistake in the future. So yeah,
I'm pretty sure you've ranted to me about this before, Daryl, on numerous occasions.
I'm 40 now. I'm officially 40. I'm the old man rage now.
Get off my lawn.
I pulled my abductor muscle on the inside of my leg on Sunday trying to keep up some teens, and I may have bruised my chest or something. I don't know. Beats me. I'm feeling all the pains of it. It's great. It's great.
So just now ranting just randomly, and we could just sit around a table in a pub and just put the world to right and say how. But seriously though, I mean, obviously when you get a bug, and that's a great opportunity to create a test right there, because you've got you've got gold dust. You've got a way of reproducing something. You can actually see a bug happening. So it's prime time. So I'm totally with you. So if you don't write a test, then when are you going to write a test? I mean, but I mean the whole 100% code coverage thing up front, Andrew. I mean, what would you say to those who say, "Oh, I haven't got time. to do 100% code coverage up front. I haven't got time to, and then maybe what happens is you want to change something, you want to create a new feature. I mean, the whole regression test is amazing. You add it, you change something, you can check it still works. But what about when you change something, like you refactor or something, and then it means that you've got like half of your tests now need to be refactored? What's your view on that in terms of efficiency and how much time it takes and all that, and how much it saves?
Well, I mean, that depends a lot on what type of test you've created, right? Like if they're testing the implementation itself, then you're going to have to redo them more often. But if they're testing the behavior, like here's my input and here's my output on the other side, then generally they become a lot more reliable because those things don't change as often, right? And so back to that example Daryl was providing of that bug coming through, that's happened before with this library where someone found something, I think, related to many-to-many relationship where there was a use case where it wasn't covered quite right. And so you make a unit test, you fail it, and you get the code changed to make it work. You run all your other 118 or so unit tests. If they're all passing, I'm done. Like I don't have to test anything else because I know everything works, right? I don't have a single doubt at that point. And it's beautiful because I don't remember what I wrote anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
you forget after a couple of years and you're like, I have a general idea, but like making sure you are 100% perfect, you have a lot of confidence being able to rely on those tests for you to make sure everything runs properly.
And there does seem to be a shift in the industry right now towards favoring integration tests and UI like Playwright style tests rather than the kind of traditional let's do a unit test for everything, which kind of is in the same light as what you just said, testing behavior rather than testing the functionality. So, where do you see the differential there?
Playwright's actually, it's a great question. So I have like 9 full-time people and some 30 contractors that work with me at Inspire Sleep. And one of the things we're working through right now is how do we effectively do automated testing? And for a long time, we focused on, I want to get to a spot where we can have full documentation and full confidence for 7 releases in a single day. What are the architectural limitations and constraints we need to put in place for this to be possible? And so we actually have a logic layer built into our plugins where it's a shared project and there's unit tests that kind of go across it and can go across multiple different plugins saying, when this input happens over here, this is my output over here. And of our 1,600 or so test cases, about half of them are unit tests, which run automatically. And that's what we try to prioritize as we're doing the work and getting new features out and new requirements. The other half, however, are what we're now starting to put Playwright around. And we're doing those type of functional automated tests. But I like to warn people occasionally because those tests I find more fragile, right? Like you change a form, now you have 50 tests failing. And now you have to record the entire test again for those 50 tests. And it can be very cumbersome, right? Like it can be very slow. If you're in a dev environment and you want to run them, the tests aren't going to run as fast. And things are changing often enough that you're never going to get 100% passing. And so where do you have your confidence that you're actually developing correctly until the very end? So that's where I push my team still to say, from an architectural standpoint, I know you want to build it that way, but can you test it automatically from that? And so, and this may cause people to frown, I don't know, but we occasionally avoid Power Automate or use it only in specific circumstances because I still see it as go-to statements in a lot of times, because you can't see exactly from like Visual Studio or from code what are all the things that are impacting this table or this specific field when you have 100 Power Automates out there that could be interacting with it. So hard decisions, right? But for us, it's trying to get, what does it look like to be in that place where we can do multiple deployments a day with that 100% confidence that we aren't going to break anything.
Somewhere there is a citizen developer that's yelling and screaming into the void. No!
Probably more than one.
Probably more than one. Well, the one that listens to the show. That one.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Daryl.
Yeah, I've tried to do that. Yeah, that's always a great question for yeah. It's there's some risk and reward with that, and some ease of use with Power Automate, and some risk involved with that. And it's not like there's a right answer or a wrong answer. And there's situations where both are correct. And it depends so heavily on the situation. That's why it's so good to have somebody that has gone through both routes or has tried this and that and realized this is a situation you want to do A, and this is a situation where you want to do B. Yeah, so it's something that's very difficult in that aspect. So, yeah. So let's get back more to the tool again. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've been talking. I enjoyed talking dev stuff. I can talk it all day, but that may not be the most interesting.
We could talk unit tests forever, right?
Yes, probably. Yes, we probably could do that. So let's just go through some of the things. So if someone that's already using the configuration, the CMT, I guess is what we'll call it. Technically it could be CDM or CDMT. Anyway, the CMT. If they're using that currently, what would it look like to start bringing in your tool, and what would they what would be the first thing they probably want to use or probably utilize?
Yeah, so there could be a few different things. So one of the big differences between how CMT works and my script is my script drives off of fetches. And so I find that a lot easier because you can make fetches a whole bunch of different ways. And you just put them in an array, you throw it in, and it creates a data package. And so if you wanted to do a full shift in how the data is generated, you would have to turn that XML file in the configuration migration data tool and actually make fetches for your different entities. And you could put filters in there, you could put whatever you want, and it would choose your data to generate it. There are a lot of people that use the tool not for generating the data, but for more of the administrative overhead side of it. And so there was a request in there a year or so ago to add a new flag in how it combines things that the configuration migration data tool added, but isn't in my library for the fetches. And it's because that person in particular would use the CMT to generate the data, but then they would use my tool to grab all those data packages, combine them, and also to do a little appending of some additional fetches into that data package before they ended up using it for their deployment. And so it really just makes things more flexible, right? And so it's like, if you're already using CMT, if you're already generating data from it, now you have the choice of combining data packages from multiple people. Now you have the choice of taking it and subtracting maybe some values that you never want to move between environments and making sure that they're never in there, right? And it ends up being now like a gateway that it goes through saying, if you ever have these fields, delete them from it before we end up putting this package into the pipeline, right? So different ways you can be flexible to use that.
You can almost use that as a sanitation tool if you were going to go from like prod down to dev, right? Remove all the email addresses. I don't want to send emails to anybody out of dev or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Because it was, I don't know how long ago it was that the configuration migration tool got the ability to add the fetch queries into the tool. I mean, I remember when it was announced, it was like, yeah, finally, because it was always a problem. So, if someone's already doing that with their schemas, they've got filters, how easy is it to kind of migrate to your extraction?
The filters will be the same because you grab them from fetches. But you would want to take the fields that you're using and either do like an advanced find and download your fetch, or the fetch XML builder and create them with an XRM toolbox, right? But then you could just dump that filter inside of that using like the fetch XML view and XRM toolbox and do the OK, and now you have it like all combined together. So that part is pretty straightforward. I am laughing a little bit internally. So that filtering capability was added in 2020 for the CMT. And I know that because my tool was in the 2018 to 2019 range. And I had a number of conversations with some architects at Microsoft that got a little bit heated because I kept expressing to them, you don't have any official way to actually export like the ADX Studio portal, which they had just bought, data, or some of the knowledge management stuff, or even some of the USD stuff, because you needed to use annotations as part of it. And without any filtering on it, now all of a sudden it's trying to export 100,000 notes from my dev environment. And because it needs certain files for the portal solution that Microsoft provided, and there's no way to filter it. And those arguments happened a few times where the architects I was working with were like, no, you can absolutely do it. I'm like, no, you can't. There's no tool to do this. And so that's where I finished building it and released it myself. And then about a few months later, I saw my tool referenced on Microsoft documentation as like, here's a community supported way to do this thing. And then probably 5-6 months later, it got released for the configuration migration data tool. And it's like, great, finally it's there. I don't know if I had an impact in that or not.
Oh, I'm sure you must have done. Yeah, I'm sure.
Right? But it's like, yeah, we need that. Yeah.
It's funny. This is another kind of, get off my lawn moment. But, it's I always think, because those of us who've been around working with Dataverse for many years, it always feels as though that people don't know how good they've got it these days. It's like the youth of today, they don't know how good, because there were so many workarounds that we had to do back in the day when we were working with Dataverse. And now, of course,
in my day, we didn't have global option sets. Everything was local.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, we used to eat coal and we'd be thankful.
Is this your rant, Scott? Daryl will talk about unit tests, and you'll talk about how hard it was walking uphill both ways back in the day.
That's right. Yes, exactly. It's like, yeah. So it's good to hear that kind of history of how how it kind of the filtering kind of got there before in your tool before it got there.
What I would suggest to your question is, if someone is using the CMT and they want to use some of these capabilities, they can automatically use like the import, like the merging or the subtracting right away, just by taking that data file, importing it, and using it. If they want to start including other data into their package, they could continue to use configuration migration data tool to generate that. There's a PowerShell script Microsoft has for grabbing data from an environment using that schema file. And then they could bring it into my library and add in fetches to it.
We're talking about migration into the migration. This is like meta migration, isn't it? So we kind of, it's like, what other migration topics can we talk about?
The migration tool from I guess Tanguy's, his was the first one I heard of for doing the migration for the ADX Studio stuff when that first kind of came out. And then, so I guess, I don't know if yours predates that or postdates that, but it's interesting how there's such a large community around Dataverse now that when things come out, and let's be honest, there's always going to be deadlines and constraints, and so Microsoft can't do everything we want. But they do tend to give us the ability to do what we need to do, and be able to extend what they've done and band-aid what we have, in a point that you can still sleep at night. I guess that makes sense. So that's been kind of something that's been very interesting as I've now I'm officially an old man on the platform. How it's been interesting seeing all that hold true throughout the time, I guess. So yeah.
The other use case that I have with my tool that may be more on the advanced side is a lot of those data packages that are used in the CMT are actually very readable, right? Like they're not complex, they're not obfuscated in kind of what data is what. And if you look at the XML file that it generates, you can pretty quickly understand exactly, this is a record, these are the fields, this is another record, these are the fields. And so we've actually used it before a number of times where it's like, I need to update these fields on these different records in this environment, and using a little bit of regex, kind of just crafting or manipulating a file, throwing it in the tool, making sure everything works properly, and then it's good to go and you can run against any environment for kind of whatever data manipulation you need. And because it's of the way it runs, you can go through 100,000 records and not actually that long. And so it can be pretty robust that way and kind of ad hoc data needs that you might have.
Love a good bit of regex. Love a bit. Can't get enough of that.
Oh man, whenever you have a regex, now you got two problems, right? I will say though, man, AI is so amazing when it comes to regex. Like somebody had a PR that I was looking at today or yesterday, and all they did is change regex. I'm like, I have no idea what this thing's supposed to be doing. I don't know what the new version is, and so I just said, hey, what is the difference between this and that? And whether it was not right or wrong, I don't know. I'm assuming it was right in what it told me, but it made sense at least in what it told me. I'm like, okay, all right, this is
We're assuming that it was right.
Yes. I was assuming it's right, which is never a good thing when it comes to the AI answering stuff. And
my last video, if you see my last video on where I asked Copilot how many N's are there in the letter enter.
Two, apparently.
Two, apparently, yes.
I don't know how it gets that. I understand the towels. Like if you have one towel, it takes 4 hours to dry. How long does it take? 2 hours. Two towels to dry. I understand that one being confusing for it, but the ends and enter, that one's scary. But the good news is regex is very computerish, so it should do better at that.
It should be, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And if you guys have probably used it, but my plug will be for regex101.com.
Oh yes,
that site. Yeah. Right,
because
it tells you everything that's happening. It's so helpful in learning how regex works.
Yeah, that's a fantastic resource.
Yes, use that a lot. Yes, but I'll put that in the show notes too. So anything you're working on in the future with the tool? Any way you're extending it? Any way you're like, oh, I'm trying to work on this. I just don't have the time yet.
So when I built it, one of the things, I had a vision for a lot of different things, but I only got so far. A lot of it was trying to figure out how do you make CRM code first, in ways where you could have extensions in your browser and you could click to restore old forms from different branches or commits and repositories and be able to roll back or roll forward and all kinds of neat things. For this tool, I wanted a way that unit testing could be really robust. And so all the unit testing happens around a DLL in C#. I don't actually put any unit tests in PowerShell using Pester framework at all, because I wanted to make the DLL, the engine of this, to be what's very reliable. And so one of the things I've played around with was creating a UI for this and actually dropping it in the Xrm toolbox, where you can put different fetches in, maybe compile a list of them, a few different settings, hit go, and maybe even add a second environment and say compare, and it can just run it and provide those results for you. Like all the logic is there, it's all tested, it's one DLL to use. It's just not published in NuGet as like its own thing. It's just published as the full PowerShell library right now. So that's something I've been thinking about. There's another tool that I've been working with a friend of mine on, which would allow an easy way to include solutions, data packages, PowerShell scripts, ad hoc C# code into a custom data package that's similar to a package deployer, but has a lot more functionality and robustness around it. And we're trying that and using it in a few different situations right now, but all of our pipelines within Inspire Sleep, for instance, is using this tool that we've been working on. And it just makes it easy because you can drop whatever you need to into it, and it will run it for you over and over again, whatever environment you approve it for.
Well, I look forward to seeing those Pester unit tests, because then then you can have true 100% code coverage. Just saying.
Wow, that hurts a little bit.
Oh my! Scott throws the gauntlet down.
Well, we always homework, give homework. It's always that important,
we always give homework. So now your homework is that you have to actually get 100% true, so you can actually stop lying.
Yeah, you claim it, so yeah.
Well, to be honest, there's probably like 10 lines in PowerShell total. And so you could probably do one PowerShell test in Pester and kind of cover all of them. Because basically everything is just like, hey, DOL, do this work for me. And then go.
You're DOL. Rounding up then. It's like 99.9%, and you've rounded up.
You could do a single unit test that just reads the actual PowerShell text and compares it to being itself that you've hard coded in the test. So you make it as brittle, like the most brittle test you can imagine. I bet you'd have it.
The most useless brittle test. Yes.
Yes. Yes. All it does is verify you haven't changed anything without changing the test.
That's all we're asking for. The most useless brittle test, Andrew. Come on, it's not.
I will add that, and I will dedicate it to both of you.
You call it the extra toolbox, the extra tool cache test. There we go. That'd be great.
Perfect.
That'd be great. We need a funny error message if it doesn't work though. I don't know.
Daryl made him do it.
An ASCII image of your face, just like dump it out.
Yeah, that'd be funny. Yeah.
It's like.
What if
like
I could generate that? Give me an ASCII image of this face.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
What was it? Was it in It was in Jurassic Park. You know the You know.
Watched that with my kids this last year. They loved it. They
I know this is Unix. Really?
Right. Yeah, I know Unix. I can hack it.
I'm going to fly through it in 3D.
Oh, I always love movies and TV shows showing that computer programmers hacking things. I'm like, nothing ever looks like that at all. Why would it ever look like that? That's dumb. Why would no? That's not how this works at all.
There's a whole subreddit dedicated to that. You know, maybe we can put that in the show notes as well.
I would like to know where the flickering screens on someone's local computer came from when they're being hacked as well.
Oh yes,
like,
glitch.
Where does that make sense? I don't know.
Now, if there was like a really messy desk with a whole bunch of like empty Mountain Dew cans on it and stuff like that, then I can get behind seeing that as being something that someone might be hacking something together. But when they're wearing like 3D goggles or having like whatever that one movie is with Tom Cruise where you can like move things.
Minority Report.
Yes, Minority Report is that.
Right,
like, this is not how this works. No, it's not done that way.
No, those screens actually seem terrible for usability.
Yeah, like how do you type on that thing? Nah.
Yeah, but I feel like doing the whole kind of swiping everything in a frustrated kind of motion quite often. That's what I feel like there should be a gesture that I could just ditch all that stuff over to the left.
And then you bring your hands back down because they're tired from all that motion swinging them around.
Well, it's a good way to burn some calories that way. It's a calisthenic interface where you're actually having to do jumping jacks
calisthenic
in order to
programming.
Yeah,
wow.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
How's that coffee coming?
Well, it's kind of, what is it like? Maybe call it not TypeScript, but like Type T or something. Where you can kind of do all these little movements and slow. I'm just going to create a unit test with a fluid motion. Yeah, that could be a thing.
All right, before we go down that rabbit hole any farther.
I told you I had a coffee. I mean, what do you expect?
Andrew, is there anything else you're working on? Anything else that we missed that you want to make sure that our listeners know about either the tool or whatever you're working on?
No. I'm always excited to see what's out there, and so I'm glad to talk about these things and how we can keep working toward that DevOps world of CRM being easy to deploy on and not just develop for. I'm nothing really new right now. I think maybe the one plug I can give is there's always new architecture, new patterns we're working on at Inspire Sleep to try to have, I tell my team, the best CRM implementation in the world for the highest confident delivery, the fastest releases, the best documentation. But if anyone ever wants to talk more about these things, please reach out. I love talking about it, and I think these are big problems to solve. That the low code revolution is sometimes obfuscating and not always helping. But I think there's going to be some cool things at the end of it eventually. But these programming issues don't really go away. They just exist in different forms depending on what technologies are out there.
Yeah. Now it's a question of if you come into a brand new project and there's 100 flows running on the project, or there's 100 plugins running on the project, what are you more scared of?
100 flows.
100 flows.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
I know because I don't do flows very much at all. So I would be very scared just because I don't know it. But if I knew it more, I think I'd still be scared. just because they're so easy to not have any idea what's going on and not be able to see it all at once either, or search it all at once either. How many of my flows are touching this?
I mean, I've done that with some clients in the past and gone in there, and you can read through every flow, you can document, and I guarantee the next release, you're going to find these phenomena that are happening. Like, why is that happening? And then you find like one completely unrelated flow that there's a step in there updating it that you didn't see it, you missed it, and you didn't remember it, and it just created problems for you.
Yep, awesome. So for our listeners to get a hold of you, Andrew, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn works. Yeah, I get those notifications. They're still enabled on my phone, unlike a lot of other apps. So they would come through.
All right. LinkedIn's the place to go. Awesome. Well, Scott, that's how our listeners can get a hold of our guests. How can our listeners get a hold of us?
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Yeah, but before I do that, actually, just quick plug for the European Power Platform Summit. It's going to be in Brussels on the 11th to 13th of June.
You're giving away tickets.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If you want to win a free ticket, actually, on my latest video, I've got a little competition that you can enter to get a free 2-day ticket. And actually, if you do want a 10%, if you don't win that, if you go on a 10% discount, you can use the discount code ScottDuro as well. So there you go. That
must be really hard for you to remember.
Very, very difficult. And I've not told anyone else that. So anyone listening to this podcast are the only ones that know about that. But yeah, so it's always an amazing event. I think this is the third one, and there's like hundreds of sessions, amazing speakers talking about all sorts of stuff. Maybe some people will be talking about configuration migration tool, and they listen to this and think this would be a great topic for to talk about. But yeah, if you do want to get in touch with us, and we would love to hear from you, you can get a hold of us by email, cast@xrmtoolbox.com, or on socials @xrmtoolcast. And yeah, Andrew, it's really been fantastic hearing about the history behind the tool and all the features. And yeah, on your GitHub page, you talk about behind the scenes algorithms, which is intriguing and mysterious and makes me want to go and look at some of the code. So I'm going to go and look at the behind the scenes algorithms. But thank you ever so much for coming on.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Good talking to you. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.
Cheers.
This has been the Xrm Toolcast with Daryl Labar and Scott Durrell. Produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @xrmtoolcast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn Xrm Toolcast page.